Welcome back to another episode of the What's Next podcast. This time we are back in person, mate. It has been a little while.
Yeah, coronavirus has really put the brakes on things. It's 7 weeks now, and it's almost like going on for a first date.
It was a bit, wasn't it?
Yeah, and you've invited me back for a second, so it's good science.
We had breakfast earlier in the week to catch back up, and I've actually let you into my apartment this time. And
yeah, thanks, mate. Look, we're really making big steps here.
Yeah.
Won't be long, and I reckon I'll get a key.
Don't push your luck. Well, we thought we'd better go through some of the things that we've been talking to our proactive clients and those clients that want to make the most out of this opportunity, and some things to help you future-proof your business in this uncertain time, because we are now living in a new economy, in a new world, and sometimes we need new lenses because the old ones can't see the things the same as what they perhaps used to be able to.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it is, you know, your perspective is always skewed by the lens that you're looking through with life. And given that we are, wait for it, in unprecedented times.
Bing! There's a bingo, yeah.
Yep, I was just about to say, if you're playing bingo, you've got a card. You know, you probably need to look at your perspective and the way you're looking at things and potentially change the lens that you've got on to go, well, what opportunities are in front of me? And if you're not seeing opportunities, then you really do need to look at the angle and the perspective that you're looking at the world and your business and what problems you are there to solve, and go, well, how can I change and how can I do this better and how can I remain relevant?
Very good. And I think we've seen probably a lot of that happen in that digital space, right? And we'll use another bingo term, bing, pivot. People have been out there pivoting like ballerinas, their businesses to other areas and figuring out how they can get some revenue in. And it's been good to watch some of these businesses actually evolve and take on board the fact that they probably should have already been in the digital space and taking it more seriously and figuring out what other businesses were already gaining market share for. So we've seen a number of businesses dive into that space.
Yeah, it's been really exciting to see the amount of businesses that have gone, gee, I'm traditional bricks and mortar, and then all of a sudden need to go far out. I need to have a digital or internet strategy here. And that typical Kiwi can-do attitude has just jumped in. But it breaks my heart a little bit because it's almost like waiting for something to happen before you take action.
Yeah.
And it makes me sit here and think, man, if these people had taken the time to invest in this stuff so much sooner, how much further would those people in that business be ahead if they had implemented that kind of stuff much, much earlier in their journey?
Yeah, it really gets me thinking, go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, like what it takes people to actually make change that's actually going to benefit them, you know? Like we've got some clients and people in our network who we've kind of said, hey, potentially this is another business similar to yours and they're doing it this way and they're having some good results. Do you want to investigate it? Oh, yeah, maybe. I might get to that. And
yeah, everybody has different levels of pain and how much pain they're prepared to endure or suffer before they go, gee, I'm actually sick and tired of doing it this way. I'll change. And I think it's just too easy to remain with that little bit of pain because it's bearable or comfortable rather than getting out of the comfort zone and going, hang on a minute, I'll try something different.
Perhaps it comes down to how bad you really want it. Yeah.
Well, coronavirus has definitely made it clear that a lot of businesses out there want it real bad enough, so they've changed.
Yeah, that's good to see.
Good on them.
Because we are in a completely new economy, like we said before. We've got, obviously, tourism has been wiped out effectively. That's 10% of our economy, roughly, let's say, is basically turned off. So then we need to be able to adapt. And there's opportunities there's a lot of contraction, I think, but there's still a lot of opportunities for every business, right?
Yeah, I think so. Again, it just comes back to your perspective and going, how do I remain relevant? And I would go back to the drawing board and look at your business plan and first go, well, what's my why? And in this new world that we're now in, how do I remain relevant? Who are my target customers and how can I make sure that I remain in front of them so that when my customer reaches their pain point, I'm the first person that they think of to go, gee, I know a business that can solve my problem.
Nice.
And you're accessible via the internet. So you've got your social channels covered off, you've got your website, because the worst thing that you could possibly have is that when somebody's ready to make a purchasing decision, they can't remember the name of the business or the name of your offering, and then they go and search it, and you don't come up, but one of your competitors do.
Or you take ages to reply when they do get in touch. And I saw a case of someone talking about how they chose between two suppliers, and it was basically they wanted to work with B, but they ended up working with A because A came back faster. And I think it's a simple hack that people don't really play to their advantage, that I think it's 80% of business is won by the business that responds first. So unfortunately, people do demand speed these days, and
Well,
it's
that's
probably
your
more
classic
so.
line, isn't it?
Speed
Wins.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it's so true.
yeah,
More often than not, the person that comes back first, and it lives into that whole now economy. You want something now, the first person that's going to come back and deal with it is going to more than likely win the work.
yeah. So you want to be fast, and you want to be able to show people that you can give them safety, right? Because a lot of people are craving safety in a time like this, especially at the moment. That'll subside a little bit, but people want an offering that's going to make them feel a bit safer because we've got so much uncertainty. So I think people should weave that in to their offerings and just think about that.
Safety. Yeah, that's good.
That's
nice.
good. I've got you thinking there.
Yeah.
Talk to me more about this now economy, mate. Is there we've got a new economy and a now economy?
Yeah, well, I think everybody's with consumerism driving so much, and everybody carrying around devices, the opportunity to be able to satisfy a need immediately is stronger than ever.
Yeah.
So if you're in business and you want and you've got something to sell, you've got to be prepared to get in somebody's face quick, smart, and be able to deliver with the same speed, because ultimately the person at the end of the day, if they want something, they're going to want it real quick. Because I think the days of going to your local mall and queuing up that you now have to do and sanitize and do your contact tracing stuff, that's going to be barriers for some people, and they're not going to be bothered. So you're going to have to look at other channels of going, well, look, let's look on Facebook, Instagram, on websites and make orders. And you're going to have to make sure that your supply chain processes are really slick, because there's nothing worse than ordering something online today and then having to wait a week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks for that to arrive, because ultimately the consumer is going to be thinking, well, gee, I could have driven down the road, picked up what I wanted and satisfied that urge.
And it's a bloody good point, actually, because if your competitor can do it and you can't, going back to speed wins, you're probably not going to get chosen, eh?
No.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think, it's just the way that consumer behaviour is going to go, and already sort of is that we demand things so quickly. And we're probably, like a lot of businesses in New Zealand, are probably still surviving or aren't worse off, given that Amazon didn't come in here and disrupt it and speed that up. But in a number of other countries, that's happened. So people, that's their expectation. But because that hasn't happened, now we've kind of had it happen via a forced lockdown, whereas Amazon are kind of doing it in markets already, eh?
Yeah, Kiwis are obsessed with bricks and mortar, aren't they? Not only with their houses, but also their shopping habits. And I think coronavirus has really opened people's eyes to what's actually possible when you're locked at home and you have to stay at home.
Yep.
And level 4, where everything was just dead quiet, people had an opportunity to sit down and really look at the way that they do things.
Yeah, and I think education would be an area where I think there's a massive amount of opportunity, where some of these big universities and schools and whatnot have had to go online or further. They kind of toe in the water, but they've had to go dive right in, so to speak, get the toe out and get right in there.
Yeah.
And it works, and it still works, and it's fine. So I think businesses should almost think about whether they can be, like, how can you make yourself an education provider? Because I think as consumer habits change, going back to the now economy and people that are driven to learn, they'll go, you look at podcasting, for instance, I want to learn right now. Okay, I'm going to get a podcast that's going to teach me about that. So how is that any different to you having a product that someone looks at and goes, I want to learn about this. Oh, this one costs. That's okay. I value those opinions of that brand. Bang, I'm going to pay for their education, and they'll do it. So I think people need to be thinking about how they can be almost an education provider with what they're doing. And that might seem far-fetched for someone that's selling a good, that we've already spoken to a number of our clients around. Instead of just selling this good or this service, why not package up how you do it? and sell that, so people can DIY and do it from their home and sell that as an education product. So there's an ability for everybody to do that. I think the people that grasp that will build a revenue stream that they otherwise wouldn't have had.
That is such an exceptional point that you make, and I think that's really about providing value. And even if it's if you're selling a good, like you were saying before, and it's examples about how the good could be used. You don't necessarily have to sell the education service. You could use that as a value offer to make people, oh, gee, this is what you can do with this product, and this is another way you can do with it. And by the time somebody's seen it multiple times, they'll go, well, that's the product for me because I know it's going to fit into my life. Boom.
Yeah.
Rather than going to competitor B, that's just purely there to try and flog a product.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. So there's options aplenty, and as people need to be aware of how consumers are changing their behaviour and adapt their businesses to take advantage of it, not being reactive and seeing like, oh, I saw Sally down the road was doing that, we better do that now. No. Think about what people are doing and then stay on the front foot of that, proactive rather than reactive.
And you mentioned before, the Amazon effect. And if you're in business, you've got to remember that a lot of the problems that you're faced with have generally been overcome by businesses across the world at some point in time. And the Amazon effect has pretty much impacted most of our major economies, hasn't had a huge impact on New Zealand. So if you want to look to how you can prevent that and future-proof your business, then you need to take some time to learn about what businesses in potentially Australia or Europe or the US are doing to go, well, what is a similar type of business done where Amazon has come along and created disruption? And there will be, you don't have to go and reinvent the wheel, but you've got to invest in some learning and make the time to invest in learning. And if you haven't invested in learning during the lockdown, because you had a perfect opportunity to invest in learning in that period, it certainly wasn't a holiday, was you need to be getting onto it now and invest in that time. And if you ultimately don't want to, then you need to be going to market and finding the people that have got the ability to do the learning or solve the problem for you and then implement it.
Bloody wise advice, mate, as always. And I think this is where sometimes we throw this curly one at some clients saying, is your entertainment bill higher than your education bill?
There it is.
Because people invest more in having a piss up than they do actually trying to upskill themselves or learn more or teach their staff more. So, one of the other objections that we've seen in this space is people say, well, I don't have a website to sell things on. And it's like, yeah, someone else solved that problem too. Going back to what you said before, Shopify exists. You can have a Shopify account up and running within 24 hours selling goods. You might, to start with, have to package those and bang them in a courier bag, but it's better than not having the sale at all. So there's no more excuses because people have already solved all these problems. And I see Facebook have launched a joint venture with Shopify where people are going to be able to basically launch a store on their Facebook page, and that's using some of the Shopify technology. So that's almost like an Amazon shopfront, basically, but it's going to give people the ability to be able to do e-commerce at scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those listening, if you're in business and you're wanting to dip your toes into this online marketplace environment, these developments in Facebook, that'll be a good place to get started because you'll be at the forefront of the curve of businesses adopting that. And then secondly, Shopify is probably one of the top-rated website providers of online storefronts, and they have a huge amount of resources and blogs available on their website of tutorial videos and how-tos. Fill your boots. You just get in there, and it's up to you ultimately to invest in the time of the learning to upskill yourself to either go, yes, I'll do this myself, or if you don't want to be inclined to do it, then invest in somebody to be able to do it for you. But Shopify is a great example. If coming back to your, if you sell services, more often than not, if you sell services, there might be a good attached to that. If it's a good that you can then brand, create a storefront and start and sell it to consumers.
Yep. We've got a couple of clients in the cleaning industry, and one of them, bang, straight to the market with a hand sanitizer.
Yep.
Selling them. then next step, brand it up.
Yep.
But it also adds doubles as basically a brand play, right? Where then more people will know about you, and they might not be your target customer yet, but they might know somebody that is, because we live in such a small country. So opportunities are plenty. What about, I think another opportunity is this is a great time for people to actually be able to revisit their business plan, right? You're probably going to struggle to revisit one if you don't have one.
Oh, yeah.
But this is a time where you do need a plan and revisiting what you've got in place, because client, for instance, we couldn't foresee this coming, but now it's a bit clearer what's going to happen, and there's some things that are on people's business plans that just aren't achievable anymore, or we've got risks that weren't there 6 months ago or 2 months ago. So
boom, there it is. Risks that weren't foreseeable 6 months ago, and it would be well worth investing the time in revisiting a SWOT analysis.
Oh yeah, what's a SWOT analysis, mate? Like
oh, you love putting me on the spot. I believe it's your strengths.
Yep, give it
your
to
weaknesses.
Me. Oh yeah,
opportunities.
Okay,
and your threats.
Oh yeah, I've heard of this.
It's something that we run through with clients in doing business plans, because it's important to understand what those are, and then you can, if you understand them, then you can prepare for them and plan for them. I think for a lot of businesses, that SWOT analysis would have changed a little bit with this new norm that we're in, this new world, these unprecedented times.
Bing.
Bingo. So it'll be well worth revisiting that. I mentioned before about refreshing yourself on your why and remaining relevant. I imagine your ideal customer is still going to remain the same, but how do you remain in contact with them and visible to that customer, knowing that people are probably spending more time working from home?
Nice. So when you say reviewing your why, is that getting really, really clear on exactly why your business exists and is in the marketplace?
Well, that great Simon Sinek.
Yeah.
People buy why you do something, not what you do.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for businesses to really deep dive into that, just really bury your head in it and understand your why. And I think when you do, it becomes quite empowering, because then all of a sudden you get a lot of clarity on some of the uniqueness and competitive advantages that your business has over your competitors in the marketplace.
Bloody beautiful. And if you haven't already, go back and listen to our podcast on purpose, because we talk about that in depth. And at a time like this as well, mate, it's very, very important to stay agile, because everything's changing.
Ding.
So quickly. Today on the Bingo Show, we've got unprecedented, we've got agile, and we've got pivot, and we actually see a Navy frigate roll into the harbour here, Phil.
Oh yeah.
Don't know what they've been up to, but no doubt that'll be tough to pivot that boat. But
fishing,
being out fishing. So being agile, because things are changing quickly, and so this is something where cash flow planning we'll speak about previously as well. But you've got your landscape and your business and your cash flow is changing every single day, so you need to be keeping an eye on it and being agile with it, because it's not just going to be, whack in those figures, hopefully that happens, because bang, you get a phone call, hey, sorry, we don't need that work anymore. All of a sudden you take $4,000 out of your pipeline, whatever. So you got to stay on top of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've spoken about cash flow on so many occasions, and recently we did a tutorial on Facebook. So if you haven't seen that, jump in. But the thing with cash flow forecasting is you don't need to be an accountant to do cash flow forecasting, and you certainly don't need an accountant to do it for you. In times like this, where everything is changing so rapidly, your cash flow modeling needs to just be kept simple so that you can update it on the fly, and it just gives you a real big picture view to highlight when the shit is likely to hit the fan. And when you can identify that in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whenever that might be, if it is in fact going to hit the fan, then you can take corrective action now to prevent that from happening. And there's a lot of power in that, a lot of power.
Yeah, you're right. And you're just staying on the front foot, right? And you're getting your mind to be creative around plugging the gaps as well. And speaking of that, that's where debtor agreements and collecting cash are going to be very, very important, because it's going to get harder probably this could be potentially one of the hardest times we're about to see to collect cash. I noticed some data over in Australia around the decrease in small businesses invoices up to 45%. So I don't know what that similar data is here in New Zealand, but I'm sure the team at Xero will publish something at some stage.
Yep.
But that's going to have a big flow-on effect. So potentially at the moment we're living in a bit of a false economy of paying people wages through the wage subsidy and them taking a decreased wage. But that's just one cost of a business. So then how do we pay the rent? How do we pay the operating expenses, the insurance, all those things? People are going to start to struggle. So your creditors are going to be the ones that people go, I might just not pay that, or well, I can't afford to. So have you got your direct debit set up? Have you had a conversation with them? Are you front of mind for them? So do they know that you're critical, that you should get paid rather than somebody else? You got to be smart. You got to start playing the game a little bit here because it's going to get tough.
And funny you mention all of that. I had a call from a client a week or so back, and I almost fell off my seat because they told me something I would have never expected from them, and that was they've accepted a new job, and the first thing that they did as part of accepting that new job is they asked for a deposit.
Wow.
A significant deposit.
Really?
Before getting underway.
Yeah,
and
good.
And I was absolutely blown away. I just virtual high-fived them over the phone. Because that just front foots a whole heap of cash flow, particularly in times like this, where you can meet your working capital obligations to be able to fulfill that job. And if you complete it and then get paid at the end, that generally is going to be your profit. Boom, job done. And you've really minimized the risk, and you've kept the lifeblood of the business being cash flowing.
Brilliant. Speaking of keeping cash flowing, there's a few different options in the market at the moment around how to access cash. So I think people shouldn't just stick to the traditional methods of going, maybe I get an overdraft or whatever, because interest is low, debt is cheap, and banks are going to start competing, right, for people's dollar and debt dollar. So the power is probably moving back into the borrower's hands to some degree. If you can service it.
Yeah, 100% right there that the availability of debt from so many different sources it's like a lolly scramble at the moment. You can just go out there and get money, and it's like picking apples from a tree.
Yeah.
But I think although it's relatively easy to access that debt, we need to make sure that we're using the debt wisely and it's solving a genuine problem within our business. We've spoken about it before on more of a consumer angle between smart debt and dumb debt.
Yeah.
And I think it would be very easy for a business in times like this to go and access debt and it become dumb debt.
Yeah.
Unnecessary stuff loading up your balance sheet that in 12 to 18 months' time, when something comes up and an investor or your banker or whoever it is looking at your balance sheet and it's seeing a whole heap of debt there to a number of different parties. The IRD $10,000 loan and the additional $1,800 per employee, that's fantastic. And it's very accessible cash for businesses that need it now. And it's going to satisfy a lot of those now urges that businesses have. But I think it's really important to think about, what's the business landscape going to look like in 8, 12 and 18 months' time? And what's the impact that debt is going to have on my balance sheet, and particularly knowing that it's debt back to the IRD. Yeah. And, the banks aren't terribly fond of businesses owing IRD. So you just need to think about that.
Yeah, very, very wise, mate. And there's some what they call fish hooks involved in that too, right, where it's, potentially up to 10% debt interest if you're not making your repayments and things. So people need to be aware of those things.
Yeah, they're always quick to highlight the positives, and then that fine print
the fine print of the IRD.
Buried away so far, and people just forget about it and go, well, gee, I'll just look at the upside and forget about the downside. Speaking
of downside, the IRD were doing bailout mode yesterday, saying that I think Stuff maybe got an article wrong, there's a shock, about tax-free allowances to employees. And I think what happened, they increased the rate quite early on in the lockdown, where I think you can, is it $20 basically a week that you can advance to your staff tax-free to help pay for, or as an allowance basically to help them pay for things around the house.
IRD had issued a determination a while back that said in certain circumstances, and this is really important when we're dealing with tax, the case needs to be determined based on the facts of the situation. And in this case, I believe it was the New Zealand Herald, but still not so much of a surprise as it would be if it was Stuff. We won't go down that rabbit hole. But they had basically published that if you were working from home, you could be entitled to $15 tax-free and to talk to your employer and get it all paid out. And it was...
Oh, wow.
It looked like it was going to create headaches for IRD employers and employees, and whoever wrote the article got it grossly wrong.
Shock.
Grossly wrong. Yeah, surprise, surprise. So they issued a thing the other day to say, look, tightening this up, and I thought it was very, very smart of IRD to front foot it and basically go, the answer was, no, you can't.
Well, I think the confusion was that the IRD would pay the money, because I had a client say to me yesterday, oh, hey, we're keen to sign up for this, like, how can I pass on the money? And I was like, no, whoever wrote whatever you've read's got it wrong. That's how it came to my attention. I said, it's you pay it yourself, it's tax deductible to the business, right? But it's not PAYE income to the employee. They get it as a tax-free allowance.
And I think on tax-free allowances, you need to make sure it's reimbursing reasonable business-related expenses that your employee is incurring on your behalf.
Yeah.
And if it's deemed to be excessive or unrealistic, then chances are it would then be deemed to be taxable income rather than being a non-taxable allowance.
Friday beers for an employee at their own house on their own potentially may not cut the mustard, maybe.
No, I don't think you'll be able to slip that one in there. But look, let me know how you get on.
Well, there we have it. There is a lot for people to think about. I think this could be one of the most valuable podcasts we've ever done to get people thinking about things that they should be doing in a time like this. And, there are still options for people. Be careful what information you're consuming about the doom and gloom and the panic, and set yourself up to be ahead of your competitors and just be ahead of where you potentially would have ended up being.
Yeah, a bloody good time for Kiwis to do what they do best, and that is to put their heads down, jump into the old shed, the garden shed, bust out the number 8 wire and start and solve problems. And if you don't have a shed that you can work in, awesome number 8 wire, I reckon you should head out and get one, because it seems to be a bit of a well-kept secret for can-do Kiwis. And I think it's going to be those ones that put their head down and really pump out some good quality work and look at how we can adapt and evolve through this. That will be the ones that will stand the test of time. Beautiful.
Plan, adapt, evolve, be agile, do all the good things that can tick your bingo off.
Yeah, I was just about to go ding, 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 ding. We're there.
We've clocked it. All right, we're going to go support the economy by grabbing a bit of lunch. Hopefully you found that valuable. As always, any questions, L&P at nextAdvisory.nz. You know how to find us on the socials. If you've got any suggestions for podcast topics, we would love to hear them. We can crack those at some stage. Thank you for listening, and hopefully you got something out of this.